Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have another edition of all my books, my middle grade collection. I am not a big middle grade reader. I have been trying to get more into middle grade novels recently, just because I have middle grade students. Middle grade is, ranges around middle school and upper elementary, and that's what I teach. And so I'm trying to get into books that my kids might potentially read, and also books that I think would be appropriate for my kids. So I have 30 books that I own of middle grade, and I've read about 23 of them. So some of them I haven't read, but most of them I've read. So let's go through what I have. The first one is City of Ember by Jeanine Duprau. Loved this book, thought it was brilliant, innovative, lots of fun. Really want to read the sequel sometime, but not at the moment. So I loved this one. Also, I have the book. I highly recommend it for kids. Mine. It's a great book. Don't think it's really appropriate for younger kids, but adults will love it. And it really connects with the idea of how difficult it is moving to a new place and how to overcome that difficulty. I thought Mine was a delightful novel by Delilah Dawson. Then I have some books that I haven't read yet but are on my shelves. I have another Delilah Dawson book, Camp Scare. I think it's going to be similar to mine. I also have some Catherine Arden books that I've read Catherine Arden's adult and stuff. I have Small Spaces and Dead Voices. That should be a lot of fun. Goes into that similar horror stuff. Then they're reading a Jennifer A. Nielsen book at my school in the English department for my students, and I wanted to read a book by her, not necessarily the same book, but a book. And so what I picked up was Rescue. This was actually kind of a panic buy. In retrospect, I shouldn't have bought this, but I did, so one day I'll read it. So those are getting through all the books that I haven't read yet. Now I'm going through the books I have read before. So I'm going to begin this list with the only Star Trek books on the list, which are the Star Trek books A Dangerous Trade and Supernova. I have a review for both of these on the channel. I thought these were delightfully short middle grade books. I read them both in one evening. They were just, quick, read them and get them done. It was a lot of fun to read. I loved reading these two books. I have never watched Prodigy, but this was my introduction to Prodigy, and it worked very well. Next, I have my Star Wars books, which is going to be the rest of the video, because I have a lot of Star Wars middle grade books. So first, I'll talk about the Justina Ireland's Spark of the Resistance, which was a tie-in book for The Rise of Skywalker. I think this book is very boring and bland, unfortunately. It has some moments, but it's pretty boring and bland. Then I have Guardians of the Whills, which actually was a lot of fun to read, but isn't memorable, unfortunately. It's, again, kind of bland. Then you have the High Republic young adult or middle grade books. By the way, Greg Rucka wrote amazing comics, but this one was just mid. Then you have some High Republic middle grade. I have the first one, A Test of Courage by Justina Ireland, which when I read it, I was lower on it, but now that I think about it, it's actually quite entertaining. I think it's a very good book. Then I have Race to Crash Point Tower, which unfortunately is one of the weakest books. It's just a meh. Then we have the absolute best High Republic middle grade book, Mission to Disaster. This was a delightful book, amazing book. How Justina Ireland goes from writing, a bad book in Spark of the Resistance, then she writes a okay, good book here, and then writes us a superb book here. It's interesting that she had that growth journey, but I thought this book was amazing. I thought it was wonderful. That's exactly what middle grade should do for Star Wars. Then I read A Quest for the Hidden City, which is also a very good High Republic novel. It's a bit longer, actually. It's I think closer to about 300 pages. Yeah, it's almost 300 pages from middle grade. That's pretty long. So it really tells a nice full story that I thought was very good. Then I have some middle grade story collections. The first one was Star Wars: The Clone Wars Stories of Light and Dark. This one is, I believe it's 10 stories that are just adaptations of television episode or arcs from the Clone Wars. So there's There's one about and they feature different types of characters. There's one that's really featuring Yoda, and one that's really featuring Anakin, one that's featuring Padme, one that's featuring Ahsoka. Like they're following all the different characters, and one featuring Rex. And then there's one story at the end that's an original short story by the wife of Dave Filoni. This book, it was fine. It was a lot of fun. If you have a kid who hasn't really who's into the Clone Wars and you want to get him reading, this is probably a good way to get him into reading. But if you want a good middle grade collection, I would recommend Star Wars Stories of Jedi and Sith. This one, I believe it's another 10 stories, and 9 out of the 10 of them were great. There was one dud in there, unfortunately, but like 9 out of the 10 were just superb reads. And the one by Delilah Dawson, it's one of the best Star Wars short stories. But this book, it's all original stories. They're not adaptations, so you're getting all original stories here. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to read. So I highly recommend it. The last batch of middle grade books I'll talk about is my Young Jedi Knights books by Kevin Anderson and Rebecca Mesta. I read all but the last 3 before, and then I recently started getting back into rereading them. So I'm going to quickly go through and just talk about my just very most basic thoughts on these books as I go through them. Heirs to the Force, a very bland opening to the series. Then you have Shadow Academy, an excellent novel, lots of fun to read. The most underrated book in the series, The Lost Ones, which I thought was superb, and I thought, man, did they do a great job with this one. And people don't give this one a good rating because it's sandwiched in between 2 of the favorites of the series, but this is an amazing book. Then you have Lightsabers. Oh, was this a superb novel. It's the one that gets all the attention. It's considered one of the best, if not the best in the series, and it's rightfully so. It's an amazing book, even though I prefer The Lost Ones, but it's an amazing book. Then you have Darkest Night, which I thought was a good book, but it was fine. And then Jedi Under Siege, which actually goes pretty dark and pretty epic for a Star Wars middle grade book, and I think it does a good job of tying together all the previous ones. So they did a pretty good job with that. So that's that arc. That's the Shadow Academy arc. Then you have the arc that I'm currently rereading now. You have Shards of Alderaan, which was fine. You have Diversity Alliance, which was surprisingly good. And then you have Delusions of Grandeur, which was fine. And then the last 2 I read, about, 10 years ago, maybe? Yeah, this would be like about 9 or 10 years ago that I read these, but my reread is happening right now. Jedi Bounty and Emperor's Plague. I remember really liking this one. I don't remember much from this one, so we'll see how they stack up when I read them soon. The last 3 books, I read Trouble on Cloud City, which is the middle of the last 3 books, but I don't remember much about it, and I don't really know why I missed these for some reason, but you have Return to Ord Mantell, you have Trouble at Cloud City, and Crisis at Crystal Reef. And those 3 I haven't read. So I'll be interested to read those someday and see how they are. But that is my collection of middle grade novels. Mostly Star Wars, and there's some Star Trek, and then there's some horror in there. I have not really gotten into fantasy middle grade yet, although I intend to sometime because I love the fantasy genre. But if you've read middle grade books, if you read these middle grade books, let me know your thoughts on them. And then if you have other middle grade novels that you love, let me know those down in the comments section below as well. I'd love to find out about what those middle grade books are. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.